Genjias. Once upon a time, in a certain place, there lived three men who all had the same name. Genjia, one was the tribal chief, the second a carpenter, and the third the chief steward. Genjia the carpenter was married to an exceptionally beautiful woman. Genjia the steward fancied her and dreamt day and night of having her for himself, but she was a very upright woman and would not let him go anywhere near her.
No, don't touch me.
Finally, he was driven to find some way of killing the carpenter in order to attain his end. After a while, the father of Genjia the chief died. The steward saw in this a golden opportunity for eliminating the carpenter. Every day he secretly studied the calligraphy of the Buddhist scriptures and succeeded in reproducing the old-fashioned and strange style in which they were written. He then wrote a document in this style and handed it to the chief, saying,
Master, here's a document I came across the other day. I cannot understand a word of it, and I have brought it here especially for you to decipher.
Genjia the chief was baffled by the writing and passed it on to his secretary in charge of documents. After reading it, the secretary said,
This document claims to be from the old chief. In it he says that he has ascended to heaven and is now serving as an official there, but he doesn't have an official mansion. He asks you, Master, to send him a carpenter, the most skilled you have, to direct the construction of such a mansion.
Genjia the chief thought constantly of his father and was most concerned to hear that he had nowhere to lay his head in heaven. He sent for Genjia the carpenter, showed him the document, and ordered him to go to heaven at once. Genjia the carpenter was greatly startled. He dared not refuse, however, and could only plead for time.
How could I disobey your order, Master? But I need some time to prepare. Please allow me 7 days after that time. Please hold a twig burning ceremony in the hemp field behind my house to Seville. Then I'll be able to ascend to heaven to build a mansion for the old chief.
Genjia the chief considered this request reasonable and willingly agreed. When Genjia the carpenter left, he went round making a few investigations. He wanted to find out where the chief had got this idea. He eventually discovered that it had originated in a classical document found by Genjia the steward. He put two and two together and concluded that it must be a sinister plot against him hatched by the steward.
The most absurd thing has happened. The chief wants me to go and build a mansion in heaven. He must have been tricked into it by Genjia the steward. I did not dare refuse but asked him to hold a twig burning ceremony behind our house before I go. It would be no use to disobey him now. There's only one way to get me out of this alive. The two of us must dig a tunnel under the cover of the night leading from the field to our bedroom, and then you can hide me there later. In a year's time, I will find some way to get even.
The wife was shocked by this tale. Hatred for the steward filled the very marrow of her bones. She was willing to do anything to save her husband. So every day, when night fell, the two of them dug the tunnel in secret. On the seventh day it was completed. They sealed the entrance with a slab of stone and scattered soil on it so that people wouldn't notice. The eighth day came for the carpenter to ascend to heaven. At the end of a retinue of elders and stewards, and with a great din of bugles and drums, the chief came to send him off. They made a pile of fagots in the hemp field and asked Genjia the carpenter to sling his toolkit over his shoulder and carry his bag in one hand. They made him stand in the middle, lit the fagots, and watch the smoke rise, carrying him up to heaven. Genjia the steward was afraid that as soon as the fagots were lit, the carpenter would spoil everything by crying out in terror.
Come on!
He shouted to the crowd.
Blow your bugles and drums. Blow your bugles and beat your drums. Laugh and cheer. Genjia the carpenter is on his way to build a mansion for our old chief. Isn't that a wonderful thing?
The chief came over to have a look. Genjia the steward pointed gleefully to the rising smoke and said,
Master, you see, there goes his horse. Genjia the carpenter is on his way to heaven.
The chief was delighted. The moment the fagots were lit and the smoke began rising into the sky, Genjia the carpenter raised the slab and escaped through the tunnel back to his own bedroom. He confined himself to his house for a whole year. His wife went to great lengths to find milk, butter, and other nutrients and food for him. And as he did no work, by the end of that year, he was plumpier and fairer skinned than ever. Meanwhile, Genjia the steward tried 1,001 ways of seducing the carpenter's wife.
No, don't touch me.
And she tried 1,001 ways of avoiding him. He failed completely to attain his goal. While Genjia the carpenter was hiding at home, He diligently practiced the calligraphy of Buddhist scriptures. He prepared a document written in the authentic style and kept it on his person. On the first anniversary of his ascent to heaven, he went and stood on the very spot where he was supposed to have been burned, the same toolkit on his shoulder and the same bag in his hand. He called out,
How is everybody? I just got back from heaven.
His wife was the first one to come out. She pretended to be extremely surprised and hurried over to report the news to the chief. The chief was very happy when he heard that Genji the carpenter was back. He gave him a hero's welcome with bugles and drums and invited him to stay in his mansion. He wanted to find out how his father was faring in heaven. On meeting the chief, Genji the carpenter said in a very serious tone of voice,
When I was constructing the official mansion in heaven, the old chief treated me with exceptional kindness, just as you always do, master. That's why I'm in such good shape. The mansion is finished, and what a magnificent building it is. 10 times the size of an earthly mansion. Only one thing is lacking, a steward. The old chief misses his old steward dearly. He very much wants the steward to go out to heaven and manage things for him. After a period of time, he can come back.
This said, he promptly produced the document and showed it to the chief, adding that it was the old chief who had asked him to bring it down. Genji the chief read the document and was totally convinced by the whole story. Presently, he sent for Genji the steward and asked him to go and work for the old chief in his newly built mansion in heaven. When Genji the steward saw Genji the carpenter standing there, when Genji the steward saw Genji the carpenter standing there and looking so well after his ascent to heaven, and when he heard the vivid description of heaven given by the carpenter, he just didn't know what to think. Perhaps I really possess some sort of magic power, he thought to himself. It was my idea for him to go to heaven, and he actually seems to have done so. Perhaps it really is possible to fly to heaven, and the old chief really does have a new mansion there. He followed the carpenter's example and asked for 7 days to get ready, and a twig-burning ceremony to be held in the hemp field behind his house to send him off to heaven. He thought that since Genji the carpenter could come back, he could too. On the 8th day, as on the previous occasion, Genji the steward stood in the middle of the fagots, with a box on his shoulder and a bag in his hand. As on the previous occasion, there was a great din of bugles and drums, and the chief gave the order to light the fagots and send him off to heaven. But the outcome this time was somewhat different. One difference was that everything was over. A pile of charred bones was found among the ashes. Another difference was that the steward never came back. He stayed on in heaven forever to help the old chief by his